I'm just wondering, what does it take to get a subscriber these days? Hi, so in this video I'm just going to talk about some of the horror films I watched in October. Most of these were first-time watches, some re-watches. One of the re-watches was the 2011 version of The Thing, a prequel to the John Carpenter classic. It still in no way compares to John Carpenter's film. It's not as good as that by any means. However, it's not as bad as I'd remembered. I actually quite enjoyed it this time around. The effects are good, even if they do use CGI. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is good, and there is some good degree of tension in it. It's not bad. I watched a Dario Argento film called Sleepless. Max von Sydow is in this as a retired police officer who comes out of retirement to investigate a serial killer and how it may relate to a case that he had some 17 years ago. Not a great film, but it does have some atmospheric moments and some particularly gruesome deaths, one of which involves an English horn. I watched Stephen King's adaptation of his own Maximum Overdrive, about an electromagnetic force that causes machinery to come to life, but in particular this all centres around a truck stop, so there's lots of trucks, lots of AC/DC and a few bazookas. I watched a made-for-TV film called Moon of the Wolf, which stars David Janssen as a Louisiana cop who has to investigate a series of murders in his small town that it seems could be caused by a werewolf. It's pretty low-grade stuff, but not bad. It's entertaining to a degree, and it's always good to see David Janssen. I watched William Friedkin's Bug, which is an adaptation of a play that was written by Tracy Letts. Now, I wouldn't be sure to actually call this a horror film. It's more of a paranoia drama, all set in a motel room. Very intensely acted by Ashley Judd and particularly Michael Shannon, but an unusual one. I watched Killer Clowns from Outer Space. This has been sitting on my DVD pile for quite some time. I didn't think it was going to be my kind of thing, to be honest, but I had a good time with it. It was entertaining, it's low budget, it's full of clowns doing kills in clownish ways, and yeah, pretty good fun. I watched a few films from this DVD set, including WAXWORK, which has got David Warner as the owner of a waxwork museum, which just suddenly appears in a town. Zach Galligan from Gremlins is one of a number of students who goes there to have a look around, and when they get close to the exhibits, they go through a portal into another dimension where those exhibits then come alive. This is really a sort of comedic homage to all types of monster movies, including Frankenstein, Dracula, all the werewolf movies, even Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors is in this. So yeah, it's a real mixed bag. It doesn't all make sense, to be honest, but there's certainly some fun practical effects in it. It's okay. I also watched Class of 1999, which is Mark L. Lester's follow-up to Class of 1984. Not a great film, but worth watching perhaps for the ending, which is very Terminator-like. I also watched Slaughter High, which has got Caroline Munro from Hammer Films. This is not a very good film. I guess it has its moments, but I didn't enjoy it. And I also watched 976 Evil 2. I haven't seen the first 976 Evil, so someone can tell me what that's like. But yeah, this was okay, fairly fun to an extent. It does have a good stunt sequence involving a getaway car, and also a bizarre sequence involving a character entering their TV and into a mashup of Night of the Living Dead and It's a Wonderful Life. I did watch Halloween 2. The good thing about this is it's set immediately after Halloween. So the story continues straight away. Unfortunately, it's not as tense or as exciting. It has its moments. Most of it is set unbelievably in a deserted hospital. There is fun watching Jamie Lee Curtis trying to remember which leg she should be limping on, and it has a good ending. And I did rewatch Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Now really this should have just been called A Halloween Story, just to avoid all the people complaining about the fact that there's no Laurie Strode or Michael Myers in this. It's an okay film. I know there's a lot of people who really love it and there's others who really hate it. I just kind of found it okay. I like some of the gloopy effects, and Dan O'Herlihy. I watched a Hammer film, Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, which stars Ralph Bates and Martine Bezic. This is a pretty good one, has its atmospheric moments. I think Edgar Wright was recently talking about this film on various podcasts because of its mirror sequences, so he was getting some tips from those for when he was filming Last Night in Soho. But yeah, it's a good film. And watching this, there's an actor in this film called Louis Fiander, and I didn't know who he was, so I looked him up. And that then led me to find another film called Who Can Kill a Child? This is quite an extraordinary film. It begins with a almost 20-minute or so documentary sequence that shows really horrible footage of children being affected by wars and natural disasters, how they're the victims of all of these things, before the film then settles into a story of a couple going to an island for their vacation, but they find that the island is deserted and there are only children there, and things start to turn pretty nasty. Very atmospheric film, quite unsettling, definitely worth a watch. I watched Pieces from 1982, which I won't say anything too much about that other than it has the most bonkers beginning scene and ending scene that I think I've seen in movies. Yeah, just watch it. I watched Phantom of the Opera, yet another version of this, but this one starring Robert Englund in a kind of Freddy mode. Not very good. A little bit atmospheric, a few good scenes, but nothing special. I watched Peter Jackson's The Frighteners, or rewatched this rather. It's been a long time since I saw it. Stars Michael J. Fox. Yeah, I still can't really take to this one too much. I don't dislike it, but I just don't feel a hell of a lot for it. It's okay. It has some effects and moments in it and some humour, but nothing too special for me. I also watched John Carpenter's version of Village of the Damned from 1995. This is an adaptation of John Wyndham's novel The Midwich Cuckoo. It was previously made as a British film in 1960. This version doesn't add anything too special. It's fairly bland production values, looks a bit like a made-for-TV film, but that said, it's got a great cast which includes Christopher Reeve, Kirstie Alley, Linda Kozlovsky from the Crocodile Dundee movies, and Michael Paré, and yeah, it has its moments and it's not bad. I also watched American Gothic from 1987. This is directed by John Hoff, a director I'm quite interested in. He did a few Disney films such as Escape to Witch Mountain, Return from Witch Mountain, The Watcher in the Woods, as well as a thriller that I really enjoy from the 70s called Eyewitness, also known as Sudden Terror, that stars Susan George. American Gothic is not great. It's about a group of youths who set off from Seattle in a float plane and they're forced to land after engine trouble on a remote island, and then they come across this family that are living there and macabre things happen. Rod Steiger is the head of the family and his performance is pretty hammy, but still the film is notable for a couple of death scenes and one scene in particular that involves a very peculiarly positioned swing. Sticking with John Hoff, I moved on to the Hammer House of Mystery and Suspense. This was a 70s TV series, but they were feature-length episodes. John Hoff directed 3 of them. One is called Checkmate, and it stars Susan George and Peter Vaughan, both of whom were reunited from John Hoff's film Sudden Terror. This is a pretty good one that involves Susan as this lady who agrees to go to Prague with her ex, but when she gets there, he disappears, her passport and luggage disappear, and a mystery develops. A particularly good episode that he did is one called A Distant Scream that stars David Carradine. In this episode, David Carradine is on his deathbed in prison, and he believes he's been in prison for most of his life for a crime that he didn't commit. And during these final moments, he manages to, if you like, transport himself back to the scene of the crime and witness his younger self just before the murderous events happen. Yeah, it's quite an unusual episode, all set on the Cornish coast, very windy and blustery and atmospheric, but yeah, well worth watching. I also rewatched Wolfen, which I haven't seen for a very long time. Albert Finney in this one, set in New York, where wolves may be on the prowl in the city streets. Directed by Michael Wadley, who had otherwise only ever done documentary films about Woodstock. So yeah, quite an unusual film, and for sure anyone that watches this will then recognize certain sounds and effects that were utilized by Predator. From my drive-in cult classics box set, I watched the film Lurkers from 1988, which is directed by Roberta Findlay, a director I think who did a lot of exploitation films, but also dabbled in a few horror. This is a very low budget film. It doesn't look good, it doesn't sound good, it's got a horrible score, but it does have some interesting ideas and some creepy moments. I quite liked it. I also watched Glorious, a new film from 2022 directed by Rebecca McKendry. Now I was interested to watch this because Rebecca McKendry is a lady who has featured several times on a podcast called Screen Drafts that I really enjoy. So yeah, I've heard her plenty of times on that and was interested to see what she was like as a director. This is a very H.P. Lovecraftian type film, low budget. It's all set in a toilet, and it stars Ryan Quanten, and it's got the voice of J.K. Simmons. It has some good ideas. I didn't love it overall. And I watched Watcher, a new film from this year that stars Maika Monroe. Maika Monroe had been so good in films such as It Follows and The Guest. I know she's been in stuff since then, but nothing especially noteworthy. But this is a great film. I think it's one of her best. She gives a really good performance in this film. It's a slow burn film, but I like that kind of atmospheric horror. Great supporting role for the actor Bern Gornham. I really like him. Yeah, I really enjoyed Watcher. Okay, so that's what I watched mostly in terms of horror in October. Let me know your thoughts, let me know your recommendations, and maybe I'll see you again on the next video. Okay, thank you, bye.